The reality is that your environment it shapes you in ways you don't even understand.
When I came over to RMG, that was one of the things that was apparent to me was the culture and the way that is cultivated and the way that is instilled into everybody and also new people.
Real estate professionals, welcome back to the RMG Agent Podcast. I'm your host, Reed Moore, here with the great Jake Bartlett.
Hey, everyone.
All right, guys, as always, go to rmgagentpodcast.com for all the goodies, all the stuff that we put out. We want you to like, subscribe, share this with a friend. Hopefully this is valuable for you. And this episode is sponsored by Area Pro. This is a tool that we think every real estate professional should have, especially just going into this new area of professionalism in our industry. We want you to check it out at areapro.com/RMG for an incredible discount code on this amazing tool. All right, Jake, what do we got going today?
Well, first off, go back and watch Do You Really Know Your Market, where we talk in deep dive about Area Pro and how we use it and how it's beneficial for you. So that's a really good one to go through.
Great episode, and we also did a brief demo afterwards just to get everybody a little show and tell on the AI functionality and also just helping them get comfortable with things that they might not be comfortable with as professionals yet.
Yep. So we have a banger of an episode today.
Yes.
I don't know that I've ever said that before, but I'm going to go ahead and say it this time. How to put the cult in culture. Your environment determines your future.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love it. This is going to make everybody nervous. It's going to be great.
Yep. So let's start with what is culture?
Yeah. So culture is something that gets thrown out there all the time. People talk about it, and it's interesting because with culture, you know when you have a good culture, you know when the culture is slipping, kind of like momentum, right? You know when you have it, and you know when you lost it. And culture, when we think about culture inside of RMG, we think of it as an ecosystem or an environment, right? We have a culture inside of the United States. We have a culture in the Northwest. We have a culture around groups of people who are doing mountain running or Ironman events or things like that. Those all end up having this ecosystem or this culture. And every business needs to have one, and the stronger it is, the better it is for the company, but the better it is for the people in the company. And so a culture is really kind of marked by a couple things. A culture is marked by a group of people that are on mission together, right? They share the same mission. And as a result of that, strong cultures end up sharing a strong language or a unique language, which is kind of what makes any culture weird, is that if you're an outsider, you don't understand the lingo, you don't understand the language, because that is a part of being inside of a culture.
Yeah, it makes me think of sports first off. When you think of the Kansas City Chiefs right now, their culture of winning, right? Like culture of winning championships, and people talk about that. And then opposite side of that would be like the Browns, the culture of losing. It doesn't matter the players, like the culture is feeding into them losing. Yeah,
and so the question is, like, if you were to listen in to the language and to the narrative, what would you hear, right? If nobody's watching, what would you hear? You would fundamentally hear a different language, but certainly even inside of those environments, whether they're winning or losing, they have a language, right? Yep. And not only do they have a language, they have a dictionary that goes along with it. When I was in the military is known for having a strong culture. And so there was a mission that we were all on together. And then you all share a lingo or a common language. And some of that is a part of the history of the culture. And part of that is shorthand so everybody can move towards mission faster, right?
Yeah, I know when I came over to RMG, that was one of the things that was apparent to me was the culture and the way that is cultivated and the way that is instilled into everybody and also new people is we have a set of foundational videos, foundational calls, and they're really the principles that we follow and we believe in, and it helps establish the culture that everybody's on.
Yeah, so why should somebody really care about culture? So I think that one of the reasons to care about culture is that especially as Americans, we have this fundamental idea that we are independent. And it's a little bit to the point where if you stop back for a second and you think about it, it's a little bit comical because we think that, as a good entrepreneur, there's this mantra of if it's to be, it's up to me. And there's really a good healthy element to that because it's what we call agency, right? Like I'm responsible for my life. That's fantastic. But the reality is that your environment is, it shapes you in ways you don't even understand, right? So let me give you an example. Years ago, I lived in Alaska, and this was probably 25 years ago. And Rebecca and I were broke. We couldn't go on a vacation, but we desperately needed one. And so I kind of started having like that tick in the eye where I was like, I'm going crazy. And I remembered that as kids in the lower 48, you could grow an avocado tree by putting 3 toothpicks in it, put it inside of a cup of water about halfway down, and it would grow roots and it would grow, and you have the beginning of an avocado tree. So I'm like, I can't go on vacation, but I'm going to grow an avocado tree because that's going to remind me of somewhere warmer than, the 20 below January we were having. Yeah. And so I put this avocado in the windowsill where it would get as much light as possible. And you know what? Roots started to grow and a little stem came out and it grew 2 leaves and then it died. Right? And because the issue is it doesn't actually matter that this was a healthy avocado seed. What mattered was the environment was just not ever going to support the growth that it needed. Right? Mm-hmm. And it's the same way for us. If you are a strongly talented person and you're driven and all that stuff, the reality is that the environment that you put yourself in, it really matters to the development of your future. And it really matters to how much you have to swim upstream just to make progress.
When we were discussing this episode, I equated it to the mountain that you climb in your real estate career. The environment is determining whether or not you're hiking it, or you're hiking it with a really heavy pack, or if there's a ski lift that's helping you take it up and get there faster and easier.
Yeah, it's a great example. We want everybody to be in the kind of shape in their business to be able to hike the mountain with a pack on.
Right.
But what we also want for you is to be in that kind of shape and to be able to take the chairlift and to spend all of that time and that energy and that focus on coming down that hill and really enjoying the ride, right, as much as possible. And the environment does that.
Let's flesh out the importance of the culture for your future.
Yeah. So like we already talked about, the importance of this is that we want to create an environment, or we want to be inside of an environment that ultimately aligns us with where we want to go. Mm-hmm. And the best way that we think to do that is to align yourself with other people that are going in that same direction. Mm-hmm. And we have these little shorthands for this, in parenting and things like that. And you might say something like, one of the most important things as a parent is to make sure that your kids have great friends. Right? We're in a season right now where all of our kids are surrounded with other really fantastic kids. And they have created this ecosystem and this culture. And as a result, all of their decisions in bulk, they're all still kids, but their decisions and the direction they're going and their encouragement to each other in sports and academics, all of that are just being multiplied over and over and over again. So your kids can succeed potentially with a bad culture. Really hard to do, pretty rare. With an okay culture, it's just going to be on them, right? With a great culture, they're going to be inspired and encouraged by a group of people. Mm-hmm. Same thing in our adult lives, same thing in our marriages, and same thing in our businesses, right? So inside of our environment as real estate professionals, who we surround ourselves and what the culture says really matters. And, it doesn't necessarily matter as much in a moment where like the stars are aligning and everything's easy. But if you're not thinking short term, you're thinking long term, the people that you're around for a 10, 20 year period of time will absolutely magnify the results for you. And by the way, you will magnify the results for them. Right.
Yeah. And we're talking about this because of the massive importance of time that we have. Like we have this finite amount of time. And when you start talking about how much you're spending on a day-to-day in a culture that's not productive for you or potentially not productive for you, just how much is wasted in that. And what's great, and you talk about your kids and the culture that they're surrounded with, when you have this really great culture that is everybody's on shared mission and we're all moving forward and fast, when somebody tries to get into that is not on same mission and is not a bonus to that culture, it gets weeded out real fast.
Yeah, it's funny and that's where like a culture starts to feel a little bit cultish, right? Is like if you're oil and water with a culture, right? If it's a culture of productivity and you don't want to be productive, if it's a culture of, speaking life and you want to say negative things, right? Like there's all of those things, this is a culture of growth and I don't care to grow as a person. I haven't read a book in 10 years, right? Like the culture starts to protect itself, especially at size and scale, and it kind of becomes its own defense mechanism against things that are not part of the culture. Now there's downsides to that as well, right? Cultures can repel new ideas, right, and all of that, but a really good healthy culture doesn't do that. It assimilates that, but it repels the things that are maybe going to be destructive to the culture.
Yeah, we see this in nature, specifically with wolves, right? Like you hear the two phrases you hear about wolves is the wolf pack or the lone wolf.
Right.
And the lone wolf becomes the lone wolf not because they're the best and that they can make it easiest. It's because they were a detriment to the culture and they were kicked out.
Right. That's exactly right.
Yep. So is there anything specific within the culture that somebody should be looking for?
Yeah, so you should be looking for a culture that is on mission, right? So there's a very clear reason that everybody's going in a direction, and it should be a culture that is surrounded by people that, at least in broad strokes, want to go the same direction as you. You can join what would fundamentally be a really good culture, but if that culture is something that doesn't align with your belief systems, it doesn't align with who you want to be or where your future is, you will be a problem for that culture and that culture will be a problem for you. So it's really not one size fits all. There's definitely key components to healthy cultures that you would say all sports teams, businesses, families all have. So there's these key elements. But apart from that, you need to find a place that aligns with at least where you think you're going.
Yeah, we have two things within our culture that define this, which is we before me and I matter.
Yes.
Right. So when we're talking about the culture and your future, those are really two good measuring factors on how you can decide if this is the right fit.
Yeah. So another thing about culture really is a lot of people, when they see a good culture, what they're seeing is they're seeing the expressions of a culture. And so they're like, oh my gosh, a good culture does this and does this and does this. Well, those are usually, in a really, really good healthy culture, those are just expressions of the culture. What a culture really is built off of is, we shorthanded it by saying mission, but a great culture has kind of an active constitution. It has some version of a mission, vision, values, beliefs, and perspectives that everybody's bought into. And there's different frameworks for that. But that's the thing that we look at, like inside of RMG, is when we make decisions, we first run it by our constitution. Like, does this align with who we say we are? And if it does, it adds to the culture. If it doesn't, and we make that, then it erodes the culture. And so, like you said, a couple of our beliefs, right, are we before me. And that is that we don't put the tribe at risk for the sake of myself, right? Honestly, it's just a really impractical thing to do if you want to go far, right? If you want to go fast and you want to be a lone wolf, cool, you're going to do that for a short period of time, right? But if you continue to do that through your life, you're not going to develop deep relationships, and that's going to inhibit your growth, and it's going to inhibit the growth of others. And then the flip side of that is the culture turns around and says to the individual, you matter, right? So if somebody says, hey, I'm not going to make this decision because I think it's not great for the tribe or the culture, the tribe looks in and says, we can take that hit because we see this as massively important for your family. And so that's one of the tensions that we have inside our culture, to be able to say, we want a thriving, robust group of individuals that are also committed to each other.
Yeah, we saw this played out in sports last week or 2 weeks ago. So Saquon Barkley, I don't know if you saw this or not, plays for the Eagles now. They were playing the Giants, his former team, and he was crushing and having just an amazing game. And the coach came to him in the fourth quarter and said, hey, you're 13 yards from your personal record. Like, I want you to get that. And Saquon's response was like, no, I'm going to let the other people, we're winning this game.
Yeah.
Let the other kids, his phrase was let them eat, like let them run the ball and get some carries and do all of that. And the coach went back to him again and was like, are you sure? Like, I will do it for you.
Yeah.
if you want. And that's exactly what it was. Saquon said, no, we are more important. And the coach said, no, like I want you if you want to get it. And ultimately pulled him and everything was good. But that was a very good visual representation of those two principles in act.
Yes, yeah. And it's one of those other things about a culture is a culture creates dialogue, right? And that's just a good, healthy dialogue, right? Because you see both of those things in action. The culture is honoring this idea of you matter to us, and the individual is saying, no, the team is important to me. And inside of that, it kind of actually doesn't matter which decision was made. The fact is that both people were in culture, right? They were a part, they were on mission together, and they were talking about it. That right there is absolute magic.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so let's talk about how you show up inside the culture.
Ooh, I love this part. Okay, so we're talking about culture, and so one of the ways that somebody could take this episode is like, oh, the reason I'm not succeeding is I'm at the wrong brokerage, I'm at the wrong team, I'm at the wrong, whatever, I'm in the wrong family, right? Okay, time out. You being in the wrong brokerage or you being in the wrong team, that actually might be true, right? But we always, going back to this, maybe one of the good things about kind of a hyper-individualized culture is that we are strong advocates for agency, and that is, I am responsible for me, right? So the first thing you have to take a look at and say, is it the culture or is it you? Right? And there's 4 different ways that people show up inside of a culture. And I just think that this is really, really important because culture isn't this magical kind of, thing. A culture is like a chili or a stew. It is just flat out the combination of all of the different elements that are put in there. Right? And so if you take all the individuals and you put them into a culture, the way that they each show up in that culture causes the culture to be rich and tasty or bitter or, like fill in the blank, right? So what I've experienced is that you have 4 different groups of people that join a culture. And so the first group of people are the people that you just absolutely are so pinch myself in the morning when you get to be in business with them, and they are curators of the culture. So a curator of the culture is somebody that they don't just come in and say, hey, I want to belong to something. They say, I want to put my fingerprints on making this environment awesome. And a curator is going to spend extra time and energy. They're going to put relationships at risk for the sake of conflict to make something better. And ultimately, they actually get authorship. So if we look inside of our company, there's probably 10, maybe even 15 people, there's maybe more than that over the years, that they're not just great parts of the culture, they actually have authorship. The reason that RMG has the culture it is that somebody was willing to fight for something that mattered for the culture. Yeah. So curators get authorship. And so there's a couple great things about this. If you're somebody who wants to help curate a culture, right? The culture, let's just say the culture is, you see it as worth curating. Like if I add into this culture, I'm not just going to get shut down and say, somebody's going to tell me shut up, it's not your business, go away, right? That's problematic. But if it's not like that, you are going to spend time and energy that you're not going to get directly compensated for, but you're going to get authorship. But not only are you going to get authorship, is you're going to get all of the skills that go along with actually doing something like that. You're going to learn how to think constructively with other people. You're going to learn to put your ideas forward and let them be beat up until they're even better than your original ideas. You're going to learn to beat up other people's ideas and then deepen the relationship so that it can handle that. People who are curators that get authorship ultimately get the most out of a culture because they are growing at an exponential rate, and then they wake up every morning and they go and they work or they lead inside of a business that they have been one of the artists of. Right?
Yep. They might be called builders or expanders, might be other terms for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have curators of the culture. The second group of people that you have are carriers of the culture. This group of people are just awesome. By the way, your curators are your culture. We were talking, you were sharing. It's kind of like a math equation. These are multipliers, right? Everything that you do in a culture multiply. All the good things multiply through them. That's amazing, right? So then you have your carriers of the culture. And these are people that come in and they might be less outspoken, right? Or they may just not be quite as influential, but they assimilate the culture. And when they show up to the office, you look at them, you like, in that person is the culture. Like the way that they make decisions, the way that they treat other people, the way that they show up, all of that stuff, right? And those people are just phenomenal to have inside of a culture. If you have a group of curators and you have a group of carriers, you have a unstoppable culture, right? So they would be your additions to the culture. So now you go down to kind of this third layer and you have consumers of the culture. And a consumer of the culture is somebody like, they're kind of there for the concert, right? They walk in and they're like, this place is healthy. This is great. Everybody loves each other. And like everybody's like, they're having conflict and they're celebrating and I want to be a part of the celebration. And they're there and they're not really adding anything, but they're not really taking anything away. They're just kind of consumers like, hey, I like to go watch this person perform and I'm just going to be there and I'm going to jump up and down, but I'm not going to be, I'm not going to spend my time and energy pouring into it. And it's interesting because this group of people, sometimes it actually just has to do with their life situation, right? They don't have maybe the skills or the emotional energy to be either curators or carriers yet, right? And a lot of people enter a culture this way. And so if you're a leader, you need to understand that when you bring somebody in and they're a good cultural fit, there's a decent chance that they actually just start out as consumers of the culture. Right. So what you also need to understand as a leader is that this person, like in a mathematical formula, is a minus, right? Now, if I have lots of multipliers and I have lots of additives, if I have somebody who is a minus, it's not that big of a deal. It's actually not that big of a hit on the business. The reason I say it's a minus is that the culture, if you have a lot of people who are kind of in this place of being consumers of the culture, it does start to tax on the culture. So if you have lots and lots and lots of these people, it adds up. It adds up small, but you have, instead of the culture getting propagated, right? The culture gets propagated to this point, and then it kind of gets enjoyed. Right.
The way I look at this, and this has played out a few different times in masterminds that I've been in, right? Like if you're in a really great mastermind that's just amazing, you've got a lot of the curators that are multiplying the conversation or multiplying the ideas and all these things. If you've got people that are embodying the culture, they are there and they add, but they're not multiplying in exponential.
Yes. Yeah.
If you get into a mastermind that's got a lot of the consumers, this shows up as a mastermind where people are willing to take the other people's ideas, but they're never willing to share their ideas, right? Like, and if you get a big enough group of the curators and carriers, you can have some of these consumers where people take the ideas and they listen, but they don't add. But if you get into a group of people and they're just all of the consumers, the mastermind almost never works because there's too much taking from the group. Yeah,
and so a class works better, right, if you have a group of consumers. And you can have a group of consumers and even people come up to you afterwards and say, gosh, thank you so much. That was really helpful. And they took notes and all of that stuff. Yeah. But you're pouring out energy like you would when you're teaching a class. But in a mastermind, you're giving and taking energy, right? And it's like, it's a facilitation. So neither one is necessarily like the right way to do it, but you're exactly right, right? So ultimately what you want to do is you want to be able to, in a culture, take people from being consumers of the culture into at least being carriers of the culture. Because not everybody is going to be somebody who's going to be a curator, but we can take them from being a consumer up. And as people sometimes they get more comfortable in the culture, they will make that shift. But we always want people moving up, sometimes after a season of life, like maybe a season of life of having little kids, right? Or having just done a move or things like that.
Well, and it could be a situation where somebody's brand new in the industry and they just need to be a consumer.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like they need to consume, they're drinking from a fire hose, and then 2-3 years in, they're now the seasoned agent, and they have the ability and authority to to grow and to add to the culture.
Yeah, it might be the most appropriate thing for them to do for a couple of years is just take in everything that they can so that they can give back at a high level.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, we've got one more to talk about.
Yeah, so there's a fourth one, and it's really, really not awesome.
Yeah, we hinted at it earlier.
Yeah.
A good culture protects from this. What do we call these people?
Cancer.
Yep.
You will have people that come into your culture, right? And you'll do your best to filter them out, but they come in and they are a cancer to the culture. They're not there to be entertained or to be just kind of to be a part of something healthy, but the way that they show up actually starts to deteriorate and eat at the healthy things. So this could be somebody who is hypercritical, right? And they're not the person who criticizes ideas for the sake of making the company better. Mm-hmm. Everything they do, everything the culture does just can't measure up, right? Everything's their fault. A lot of times they're victims, right? Like if these people were this way and if the leaders were this way and if my coworkers were this way, and they just, like they walk in the office and people just would rather they have stayed home, mm-hmm. right? The problem with cancer in the culture, there's a couple problems, right? Like if you think of actually literal cancer actually has to be fed by healthy stuff, right? So cancer takes in mm-hmm. healthy things, right? Like it has to feed itself to grow. And so cancer will like take out of your culture, not just erode the culture, but it will actually vacuum value. And you'll have really good meaning people in leadership in your company that are curators and carriers that will pour into the cancerous person thinking that, hey, I want to fill this person up enough to where they flip over. But the reality is if they're showing up in a cancerous way, you're actually just feeding the cancer. Yeah,
we used the math equation for this was that these are dividers, right?
Yes.
Like they divide the culture, and they divide it in a few different ways. They take what's great and half it
yep.
or more, and they also create divisions within groups. So you now start to see like packs forming in a culture.
Yeah, absolutely. You see different different niches of agents that kind of do this, and you see like a division between here's a group of leaders that are pouring out blood, sweat, and tears to empower their people, and now this group of people says, hey, we don't think you're for us. Mm. Like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
Well, came from this person, right? This person sowed that seed. And the reason that this mathematically would be a divider is, if we look at somebody who's a consumer, we have a lot of multiplication, a lot of addition, and a couple of subtractions. Like that's totally fine. But all of a sudden you put somebody who is a divider in the mix, and they offset your very best people, mm-hmm. right? Your curators, because they're multipliers. And so if you have somebody that comes in and they are a cancer and they're an influential cancer, mm-hmm. you have somebody that is, like they have the ability to divide and do a tremendous amount of damage in your culture. One of the hard things for me, and I think for a lot of leaders, at least in our industry, is we see the best, we see what's possible in people, and we root for that, and we can easily overlook cancer, and it can cost you your entire company.
Yeah, so, and I want to frame this in the sense of like, just if somebody is questioning things and asking good, solid questions that make you think, they're not a cancer. I tend to be in some situations can be more of the black hat, like sure. trying to poke holes and find problems with something, but it's only because I care and I want this situation to be better.
I love it. And that will poke at the insecurity of a leader, because ultimately it's really interesting because your curators and your cancers show up sometimes as this in the same way, with a very different spirit, with a very different intention, yeah. right? And that's the thing is like if you, it's the problem is if you're an insecure leader, you will not have curators. Mm-hmm. You will not have multipliers in your company. Like the best you're gonna get is additives because of your insecurity. So I think it's great. And you're gonna have to understand what's the difference. There's been so many times where I've had people in our company and I'm just like, man, I think that person's a problem. And you let it play out for a little bit and you realize, no, that person really, really loves me, mm-hmm. right? And they really love this culture. And they make me angry a lot because they care about this thing more than I do. And instead of like squelching that, I need to let them have authorship in that area.
Yeah, they care enough to question you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we laid out the 4 ways that somebody shows up.
Yeah.
And those are the curators, carriers, consumers, and cancers. So now if you're questioning your environment or how you're showing up, you need to first identify truly which one of these you are.
Yes. Yeah.
And then if you fall into probably those bottom two, consumer or cancer, like you're probably the problem and it's not your environment. If you fall into carriers or curators and things still aren't going well, now it's probably time to question our environment.
Yeah, I think it's just great advice, because we go back to agency. I'm responsible for me, so I'm going to look in the mirror and say, am I a cancer in this culture? By the way, you might be a cancer in the culture because you should be going a totally different direction in your life. Right? Like you can accidentally show up that way and do damage even though you're not paying attention to that. So pay attention. You actually could be that way because you're not controlling your mindset. Right? You're that guy. And so, yeah, if you're that or you're a consumer, you need to take a look in the mirror, right? And then if you realize, no, like I ride for the brand and I really intentionally desire to have authorship because I believe in this place, but you constantly get shut down. By the way, not shut down as in they didn't take my idea, I'm taking my teddy bear and going home. But that, like, if you were wanting to fight for something that you thought was important to the culture, that it never gets listened to. To be, a mature adult can have somebody hear their idea and say no and be like, okay, cool, right? It's different. It's a difference when somebody doesn't agree with you as opposed to they're unwilling to listen. They're unwilling to even say, I don't want to go that way, but I really appreciate you bringing that up. And that's kind of a difference. And so if that happens over and over and over again in a culture, and you have the conversations because you actually are showing up as the person who's willing to fight for the relationship, then you have to start thinking about where else to go.
Yeah, it makes me think of the 5 dysfunction of the team. One of them is the willing to challenge each other. Right?
Yeah, that's right. So,
awesome. I truly believe this did fall in the banger category.
Yeah, it was great, man.
Of episodes. Stay tuned for our next episode and go back and check out some of the other stuff. I think we're up to 54 episodes now, plus some master series stuff. So there's lots of content. And where do they go to get the content?
You guys go to rmgagentpodcast.com and don't forget to check out Area Pro at areapro.com/RMG. I promise you are going to want this in your professional toolbox. Like, subscribe, share on YouTube, share on Apple Podcasts, all of that stuff. All right, land the plane for us.
All right, guys, as always, we are here to impact, empower, and encourage you in all things you do, and specifically your real estate career.
Awesome. Take care, everybody.